Rock on high school. Well, I don't hear about history. Rock on high school. That's not where I wanna be. Rock on high
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, so when most people think of inspirational music, they think of people like Frank Sinatra, who was a classic singer. He has tons of hits and he's been around for a long time. Or you may think of someone like Bob Dylan, who has written tons of songs whose music is still being covered by popular artists today. Some of you may think of people like Michael Jackson, who was a fantastic dancer. He was the voice of a generation, fantastic talent. But when people think of inspirational music, not everyone thinks of punk rock. Now, that song that I just played for you was from a punk rock band called the Ramones. First time I ever heard that song was when I was a wee lad playing Tony Hawk's Underground 2 on the PlayStation. And I heard that song come on amongst the various tracks on that video game, and I thought to myself, wow, what is this band, and how can I get a part of this music? And so I looked it up, and from then on, punk rock has always been a part of my life. Now, when most people think of punk rockers, you think of people like this. People with giant mohawks, crazy colored hair, leather jackets with spikes all on them, and patches, and, people who are just outside of society. Now, in order to tell you how punk rock is inspirational, I feel I need to give you a bit of information about punk rock. These people right here, what people know as the typical punk rockers, is what's known as underground punk rockers. And so these are the people that don't really fit into society. In their high school, then they didn't play sports. They didn't do cheerleading. They weren't on the chess team. They just couldn't find a group that they could fit into. And so when punk rock came out, then they're like, hey, we're punk rockers. They developed their own style because they are outsiders. They don't fit in with society. And so they figured out a way where they could fit in with their own crowd. Now, a lot of people aren't familiar with this type of punk rock, more of the underground stuff. What we're most familiar with is what's known as mainstream punk. And so here's some bands that are mainstream punk. Bands like Green Day, which we've all heard. The Ramones, which I explained earlier. Nirvana. The thing about Nirvana is a lot of people think that they are grunge music. The thing is, Nirvana self-describes themselves as punk rock. They even have a slogan when they first came out called "Taking Punk to the Masses." And so if that's not punk rock, I don't know what is. And even a lot of Joan Jett's early stuff was punk rock. And the thing about these mainstream punk rockers is the underground punk rockers can't really fit in with them. They just don't feel that connection anymore. For example, Green Day used to be an underground punk rock band. They would play in underground punk rock clubs all over California. And there was a club that they were the main band at. They were the house act, that they would play there pretty much every night. And once Green Day got a major record label, then the underground punk rock scene disowned them because they don't want anything to do with that. They don't want anything that's mainstream. They don't want anything that has to do with the establishment or anything like that. And so they could no longer connect to bands like Green Day or Nirvana once they got a major record label. But on the upside is, although the underground punk rockers could not connect to these people, the mainstream crowd can. It expanded punk rock to what we know it as today. And as you guys know, everyone knows these bands. And so, whether we know it or not, we have been influenced by punk rock, and I'll prove it to you. Who here has seen this logo one time or another? Good, we got a good majority of hands. Does anyone know what band this logo belongs to? Yeah?
Misfits.
Correct, this is the Misfits. So we have all, whether we're in high school or college or on the street or whatever, we probably all walked by somebody wearing a Misfits shirt or a jacket or something like that. And Misfits is a great punk rock band. Does anyone know what this logo is? Has anyone seen it before? Yeah? Who knows what it is? No. Anyone else? Good guess though. Anyone? Yeah?
Nirvana.
Correct, that is Nirvana. And now that you see it, you know that it's Nirvana. Once again, we've all seen someone, with a Nirvana shirt walking around or something like that. Has anyone seen this logo before? Yeah, some people. Does anyone know what band it is? Yeah?
The Offspring.
It is The Offspring. Offspring is a punk rock band. Wonderful. So whether we know it or not, we've all seen these logos at one time or another, so we've all been inspired by them without even knowing it. Punk rock saves lives, everybody. And let me tell you a story. So I had a friend, just for this, we'll call him Johnny. And Johnny was what you would describe as kind of an outsider. He wasn't like a big Mohawk punk rock guy, but he was bullied a whole lot in high school. And, it got to the point where he was bullied so bad that he actually was contemplating suicide. And when he was going home one day, ready to commit suicide, then he discovered punk rock music. And he told me from that point on, when he discovered punk rock, it helped him get through the bullying because he knows that by listening to this music, the message that they bring is he's not the only one who's an outsider. There's a whole slew of punk rockers in the world who are outsiders that he could fit in with. But punk rock does not just affect the listeners. It also affects the bands themselves. For example, this is a punk rock band called The Addicts. And The Addicts would fall into the underground punk rock spectrum. And The Addicts, cool thing about them, they have been a band since 1976. And something rare about them is they have all original members since 1976. Now, there aren't a whole lot of bands out today, especially from 1976, that have all original members. This is really rare. And because the Addicts are in the underground punk rock spectrum, it's not like they're going out and selling out stadiums and making millions of dollars. These guys basically go on a tour, in their van all together, and they make enough money basically just to live. They make enough money for gas and food and to pay their bills back home. It's not like Kanye West going and selling out stadiums and taking private jets places. These aren't how these guys roll. And so, after over 40 years, these guys have been doing their life like this. And why is it? It's not because of the money, obviously. It's because they're inspired by the music they make and by the lifestyle that they bring. Another band that is inspirational is a band called the Sex Pistols. Anyone heard of the Sex Pistols? Very famous punk rock band. Good job, everybody. So the Sex Pistols, they are still popular today. We probably have some friends that listen to them. They're still on the radio and everything. And to punk rockers everywhere, underground and the mainstream, then they are a super inspirational band. But the thing about them is they only created one album in their entire career. In the mid-70s, they made one studio album and were around for maybe like 2 years and called it quits. Now, if that isn't inspiration to music, I don't know what is. So in closing, everybody, punk rock is not just a form of music, it is a lifestyle. Thank you.